Hi there, very good evening. Welcome back to the continuous session on these advanced research methodologies. Tonight, we have a brand new topic of this research methodology, which is the research paradigm, and another one to go with research philosophy. Last week, we had a look at the ways that we could develop hypotheses, and from the hypothesis as to what to do to develop your research objectives, and from the research objectives, what to do to develop your research question. And tonight I'm going to discuss about how to develop your research methodology to answer this research question, because the overall objective of your research is to answer the research question. And if you answer the research question, that answer is what we call the solution. And if you apply that, and your problem will be sorted, your problem will be solved so that your symptoms will disappear. So we have to know how we're going to find these answer through. That is what it is, the discussion. And in fact, I'm going to start the research methodology only tonight. So far, we learned how to find out the research question. So far, we learned how to develop our research question, how to define this research question clearly. Now we're going to discuss about how to answer this question. So tonight I'm having two recordings. Number one is research paradigm. That's what I'm going to do first. And another lectures will follow on the philosophy. And I'll be taking a very shorter version of that, very simple message to you. So let's have a look at it. Tonight I would be having a couple of terminologies as well. Let me tell you that. One terminology would be the epistemology. That is one of the terminologies we use when we talk about research methodology. And another one I would be using is ontology, epistemology. Let me discuss all those tonight. So let's move further. To start this thing, we all have a question that why do we say the research methodology before we do the research? If you do your master's research, or if you do your PhD research or bachelor's research, you have to give a proposal to your lecturer, to your supervisor, that this is the research methodology I'm going to follow. Okay, if you do a research for yourself, for your own business problem, you don't need to say anyone that this is a methodology I'm going to use to find a solution for my problem. You don't need to. But if it is an academic context, we have to inform the supervisor the research methodology we're going to use to answer the research problem. The reason is because the methodology we provide should be reasonable, should be appropriate. Otherwise, you would be using a wrong methodology that would not get the answer that is applicable to your research problem, that doesn't answer your research question. So let me discuss this statement first. Now I have an image here. This image is an image of an apartment. Okay, in this apartment, I have three questions to answer here. Number one question, that this apartment is in India, and I'm on holiday there. So I want to take a serviced apartment here, one portion of this apartment there, to stay for a week. So I'm going to India on a holiday, and I want to stay in an apartment. I'm looking for an apartment to stay there for a week. So I want an apartment. And the second question is, the second context is, I am moving to India to live because my business is moving to that country. So I want to be there for another 2 years time. Next 2 years, I want to live there. So I want to rent an apartment for 2 years. That is the second context. The third context is, I am permanently moving to India, and I want to buy an apartment to stay in India for the rest of my life. Otherwise, until I decide to leave the country, I want to be there. So I want to buy one. So three contexts here. Number one, I want to stay there on a holiday for 1 week, and I want to stay there for 2 years for a business purpose, and I want to live there to stay there continuously for a personal purpose. Three questions in here. Now, to answer all these three questions, otherwise to select an apartment for the first purpose, to stay there for 1 week, you do a test on the apartment. And to stay there for 2 years on rent, you do a different test. And to buy an apartment, you do a different test. Okay, all of these contexts are the same. In other words, you want the apartment to live. If you want to live there for 1 week on a holiday, if you want to live there for 2 years for a business purpose, and if you live there forever, we do different tests in here. if you want to stay there for 1 week, what you do is you just check if the AC is working, the apartment is clean, and if the lift is working, and that is it. You don't go for the tests. And if you want to live there for 2 years, you check the apartment, you check the owners, and you speak to the owners, and you go around and see the vicinity. If you have any shoppings or all whatever you wanted to do around, you check, are they all available to you? That is what you do for the second purpose. The third purpose, you do a different test, different research. In other words, that you go for a title check, you go for the pedigree, and you go for this history and check the history of this apartment or this property for last 30 years or 50 years. And you appoint a lawyer there to do all these paperwork and so on. You do a different test, right? So now all of these three contexts are for you to find an apartment to live. If you want to live there for 1 week, shorter period, or if you want to live there for 2 years, for a longer period, and if you want to live there for your life, all these three contexts make you to do a different tests, different researches here. That is what the concept is. Now, let's say you want to stay there for a week, and do you appoint a lawyer to test the deed title, the title of this property, the pedigree, the history of the property? Do you do it? Do you appoint a lawyer to rent a property for 2 years, or maybe to stay there for 1 year, 1 week for a holiday? Do you do that? You don't. And if you want to buy this apartment to live there forever, do you only do a test that if the AC is working, the lift is working, do you have any shoppings around, and is it fine with you? No, you go further and you appoint some legal advisor to do further test to make sure the title is clear, there is no claims on the property by other third parties, and if you buy it today, that will be yours, no legal claims, no litigations, or so on. So we do that test. And my question here is, what if you do this test across? You want to buy an apartment and you do this 1 week's test, and you want to stay there for 1 week and you do this purchasing test. If you do this, these tests are not appropriate. Okay, so all we have to do is this. If you have a research problem, you should definitely do the appropriate tests. If you want to fall in love with someone, you have to do a test. And if you want to travel with someone for a day, you have to do a different test. And if you want to do some business with the same guy, you may have to do a different test on that. Right? You don't apply these tests across. Right? So this is why, since we are all studying to do a research, the supervisors want you to propose a research methodology, so that if you have done something right, they would say, okay, if you have done something not right, or something to be changed, or something to be improved, they would advise you to do it. So we should really know what research approach, what research methodology we use initially to approach your research. That is the first thing, right? So it is established here. If you want to study a problem, there is some appropriate research methodology that need to be followed. You can't study the way you understand it. It may be time effective or time consuming or cost consuming or money consuming. So if you do a bigger research where you only need a smaller research. And on the other side, you may need a bigger research on that, but you do some minor research on this one, it may cost all of your project what you do. So we should be clear about the appropriateness of the research we do. Now, the next point tonight is this. Last class, we developed the research question. The research question, we all remember. The research question was simply this: is there any relationship? The example we took last night or last class was, is there a relationship between the blood sugar of this patient and the exercise he does? That was the question we had, or some kind of question that way. Now, that's what we call the research question. If you answer this research question, you'll find an answer. Okay, and the answer says, if the answer says there's a relationship, and then we can make some recommendation to do something with your exercise so that your blood sugar can be controlled, can be adjusted, right? Now, to travel from this point, the question point, the point A to point B, we have to use a research methodology. That is what I make mention of here, right? Right. Now, at the end of your research, you get an answer. At the end of your research, you get an answer. There's a relationship between the exercise of this patient and his blood sugar. There's a relationship between the water you consume and the temperature. There's a temperature outside. There's a relationship between your customer services and the sales you have, something like that. You would find an answer. Now, what I said earlier, ontology is what we call the answer. In other words, ontology is what we know. Ontology is what we know. Ontology means what we know. So the answer, ontology means what is the answer? Now, is there a relationship between the blood sugar and the exercise? Right? If you find an answer for it, what we know about this is what we call ontology. So ontology, very simple meaning, what we know, right? The epistemology is the epistemology is how do we know what we know? How do we know what we know? Okay, that is the tricky terminology here. How do we know what we know? It's epistemology. Because if you study, if there is any relationship between the blood sugar and the patient's exercise, you should definitely apply an appropriate methodology. And that is what I'm calling epistemology. How do you know there's a relationship between this guy's blood sugar and the exercise he does? How do we know what we know? That is what we call epistemology. Now, let me explain that to you. The risky part of using the wrong epistemology. To get to know something, we have so many methods. As I said before, to get to know this apartment is appropriate for us to stay for 1 week, to get to know if this is okay for us to live for 2 years, to get to know if this is okay for us to buy. There are different epistemologies. You get to know something at the end of the research, and the way you get to know should be appropriate. Otherwise, what you get to know is not the right answer. Let me explain that using an example here. Look at this mobile phone. This mobile phone, if I ask you, the question I have is, what is this device? What is this device? Right? And you would say it is a mobile phone. It is a mobile phone, right? It's clear because you use that phone to make a phone call. Right? So if I ask you what is this, you would say mobile phone. Then I ask, why do you say it's mobile phone? You say, I have done some research on that. The research was, I tried to make a phone call. I tried to use some WhatsApp. I tried to download some apps, and I tried to contact someone from this. It is contacting the other party on the other end. So it is a mobile phone. It is making phone calls for me. Absolutely fine. And while you are listening to this lecture, if you have a 2-year-old kid sitting next to you, just spot this image and ask him, what is this, darling? And he would say, Dada, this is my toy. If you ask him, why do you call it a toy? He would say, there are some games in it. There are some stuffs that I can play in that, and I play with it. So it's a toy. He doesn't make any phone calls. He doesn't use your WhatsApp maybe. And he says it's a toy. Right? If you ask him why, he says the reason. It is also right. He's also right. So in fact, what is this? Is it a mobile phone or a toy? There's a confusion. The reason why the answer differ here is because the epistemology. You tried this phone to make a phone call, and you end up with the answer that is a phone. And he tried playing a game in this, and he ended up with an answer that is a toy. Different two methodologies. That's what I said. The ontology, the answer you find out totally depends on the methodology or the epistemology. When the epistemology differ, the answer will differ. When the epistemology's quality go down, the answer's quality will go down definitely. That is what it means. Your ontology is totally depending on the quality of epistemology. So when we want to solve a problem, it is a must. It is so important for us to propose the epistemology you're going to go through to find your answer. Otherwise, you would definitely find out the wrong answer. Let me tell you another example in here. Let's say you have a girl and you have your son. Your son is looking for that girl. So you wanted to find out whether this girl is the right fit for your son. So what you do, you have different research methodologies to do a research, to do a background check on this girl. So you have an option. Let me tell you the first option. You are my friend and I'm the lecturer of the girl. You speak to me, Mr. Lecturer, do you know this girl? My son is interested in her. So what is your opinion? I would say very good girl, very cultured, down to earth, and she answers all what I ask, and she doesn't do that, and she doesn't do this. She's so pleasing and stuff. And then, you say, yeah, good, let me go ahead. And you go home and tell your wife, yeah, my son, our son has got a good partner now. And next day, when you're walking around, you meet your friend on the road and tell your friend that I'm getting married to this daughter to my son. And he says, oh, that girl, she's my neighbor. And he says, don't you have any other option? Right now, a different research now. You speak to me, lecturer. I know the girl as a lecturer. In my lecturing capacity, the relationship is only this. And as a lecturer, I know her as a good girl. And if you speak to the neighbor says some other different answer. My answer said to you, go ahead. And this neighbor's answer would say, no, don't go, because I know her. The neighbor might have his own interest. It's a different story. But what I say is, when the research methodology changes, the answer changes. Okay, so this is the story of every single research you do. If you do the wrong research methodology, if you find out the wrong answer, we end up in lots of bad things because we use the wrong methodology, right? So we should be careful about finding the research methodology right. You may find the wrong answer, that's not a problem, but if you find the wrong epistemology, wrong methodology, you would end up with the wrong answer definitely. There's no way out from it. So we should be careful about finding out, designing our epistemology correct. Okay, to do this, there are so many theories we have, so many tools we have, and the basic tool everyone uses is called what? The research onion. Research onion, right? This has the approach where we can consider all the parts that we need to include in our research methodology. The first thing we have to discuss about is the philosophy. The second thing we need to discuss about the approach. And the third thing we should discuss about the strategy. And the next thing is about the choice. And the thing after that is one is the time horizon and the techniques and the procedures finally. Right now, these are all different topics and I will discuss all of these one by one in the coming sessions. However, this is the whole thing that we have to learn in our research methodology. Look at this. You have your research question here. You have your research question here. And you have to be with your answer here within 6 months time, maybe, because your research, they allow you basic minimum 6 months. So 6 months time. And you do this, you follow these old rules, right? From the question to the answer, taking 6 months time, following this methodology. That is what I'm calling epistemology. So you have a question here, and you follow an epistemology, and your epistemology is this, and you finally find out the answer. This epistemology should be appropriate. And how to make it appropriate is what we're going to start from tonight onward to discuss it. So that will be it on the introduction of these research methodologies, first session, how to move from the question to the answer. And we discussed two terminologies in here, epistemology and the ontology. Ontology is the basic answer you find out at the end of your research. And the epistemology is how do you find out your answer? And how do you find out your answer is what? The research methodology. And the first thing you got to do is about the research philosophy. And we will be discussing that philosophy on the next lecture. Thank you very much for joining me tonight and have a great day. I see you all in the next session. Thank you. Good night.